So you've sent your SVG, your Inkscape SVG through Blender, and maybe you received that there were some possible errors. But essentially you got that final email that says meshing is complete, but maybe there were some errors. And we know that there can be false positives. Or maybe you received no errors and it looks like it went through perfectly. The bottom line is no matter what that result was, you want to inspect your blend files that are returned to you to make sure that they are correct, right? And that's what this video is all about. So let's go into our Google Share. So this is the Hershey Country Club Google Share. I ran it through Blender and it came back and it said, hey, there are possible issues here, but again, they could be false positives. And if I go into my completed folder, I can see that there are two folders here. One is my cut and one is my mesh. And if you remember from the theory, the cut is the two-dimensional, just straight shapes of those shapes, the ones on top, punching through the ones underneath them, and so forth, those various layers. Then what we do is we mesh them, which means we change them, and I'll show you what a mesh looks like. We change it so that we divide them up into really small triangles in order so that they can be conformed later on. So a mesh can be wrapped around our terrain. What I recommend you do is when this completes is open up your mesh.blend, and we're going to do a deep inspection of this. And if everything looks good in your mesh.blend, most likely everything cut. Now, if everything does not look good in your mesh.blend, that's when we're going to look at this cut file to see if we can get some additional information. It's not a bad idea to look at both. Sometimes it's easier to spot stuff in the cut versus the mesh. Most of the time it's easier to spot it in here in this mesh. So let's take a look at this. Well, first of all, you need to do is you need to download your mesh.blend. You can hit this button here and you hit download anyway and it gets downloaded. I've already done that since this is a big file. I didn't want you to have you guys wait on me. So I'm going to hit open. And at this point, Blender is going to open up. And for me, it's opening up on a separate window so you can't see it. But now it's open. Let me bring it over here. And you are going to get this pop-up that is asking you to allow an execution. And you need to hit allow because this actually is the OPCD script. You can see here, OPCD tools, and it's got a version number in here. So this is April 17th, 2023. So this is done about 15 days ago. You can permanently allow execution for scripts and you won't get this pop-up anymore. I like to leave that disabled because every time I open up, I want to see if there was an update here and know what version I'm working on. So I'm going to hit allow execution. Now when that happens, I'm going to get this OPCD, so this OPCD pop out you see here. Now if I hit the N key, it disappears. So I can move that aside, and I am going to do that because we're not going to be using these tools quite yet. These are later videos. But also notice that the version we're on is up here. If you've used the V3 tools in the past, you had to manually upgrade that. That's not the case anymore. The latest and greatest tools are included whenever you run something through Blender and you're giving your mesh file back. The latest tools are included in there, so you don't need to worry about that anymore. So I'm going to hit the N key to get out of this, and you should have taken, hopefully you took the Blender tutorial earlier in the course, and you have a good idea of how to navigate, but I'll give you some very basic lesson right now, which is, if I move my mouse around right now, I can't really go anywhere. Now, there are some things I can do with, if I hold down the middle mouse button, I'm holding down the middle mouse, I can kind of pan around. And if I hold down shift in the middle mouse button, I can kind of drag to different areas, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. Right? It doesn't work great. And then if I scroll, I can zoom in and out. And if I highlight something like this shape and I hit numpad, right, numpad period, it'll zoom in, and now I can zoom in and out directly on that shape. And if I hit shift, I can move back and forth. This isn't the best way to do an inspection of your course though. So what I recommend to do, and let me show you, as I'm looking around and I'm zooming out, you see it looks like I'm getting some Z fighting here. This is actually normal behavior. So what that is, if we want to temporarily disable this, there is a course plane that sits underneath everything. It's this gray square that you see down here, okay? So if I go here and I highlight over here, I see course plane. You can see it sits underneath. Well, you zoom out really far, you get some Z footing associated with it. That's completely normal, but if I come up here to course plane and I hit hide, that goes away. right? When you zoom in, you typically don't see that. But let's get back to navigation. So with navigation, we can also do a thing called flying around. So if I hit Shift tilde, tilde is next to the left of the one key at the top of your keyboard, Shift tilde. Now, when I move my mouse around, not even pressing anything at this point, I'm looking around, okay? If I hit the W key, it's hard to tell, but I'm actually moving forward. If I hit the S key, I start moving backwards. It's hard to see. D goes left, D goes right, A goes left, E goes up and down. Now, if I want to speed this up, I'm going to hit the W key, and I'm also going to mouse scroll wheel forward, and that increases the speed now. And if I want to go super fast, I can hold down Shift and W, and you can see now I can zoom across the course. I'm holding down Shift W, and I'm moving really fast. So this allows me to really go around my course in super time, okay? Now, what you're seeing here is pretty much the final splines of the Hershey Country Club. And I did this for a reason. I hope you only did 2 holes, because trying to find a mistake when you've got all of this to look at is very difficult. So my recommendation for doing 2 holes is because then you can run it through Blender. And actually, I want you to run it through Unity. I want you to put trees. I want you to play 2 holes. That way, when you come back, you can add a couple more holes, run it through Blender, and look for mistakes. And instead of trying to find a needle in a haystack, which is what I'm doing right now. Do you see anything wrong here? Well, I know that the fact that there is nothing wrong here, but I also build out this course a couple holes at a time. So I know there's nothing wrong. However, let me pause the video and bring up another version of this. So this is Hershey Country Club again, but this is a version where there is something broken. Now you think, well, this is obvious. Well, let's go back here and let's turn off. If you remember, that is the course plane. So let me just disable the course plane first. And now let's look. Do you see it? Come on, it's right there. No, it's not easy to spot. There is a mistake here. In this case, it was really subtle. And until I flew around and found it, I probably would have missed it and only would have found it later on when I'm working inside of Unity and probably planting some grasses in an area where I saw it. The thing is, it's not the end of the world if you miss something. You can come back and fix things. Ultimately, you're just gonna have to run everything through Blender again. You're gonna have to import it into Unity. It can certainly be done. It just takes a little bit of extra time. And it just slows down your project. So I'm going to show you where this is at though. And let me zoom in here. And this one's pretty subtle. Now, some of them are much more obvious. I'm going to give you a couple more examples, but here it is. It's this area right here. This is actually a parking lot around the drive. This is the driving range. Actually, the driving range over here. There's like oh, I'm sorry. This is the one of the clubhouses here. There are multiple clubhouses. There's a pool here and such, but it didn't cut correctly. And you can see this should be like a big parking lot. And this is a separate cart path here. And this is a cart path here that goes into this clubhouse. But this whole piece here got cut off for some reason. Now I did end up fixing this. I think it was a really sharp node right about here. But my point is, if you're doing multiple holes and you try to do your whole course, you might miss something like this. It also becomes very hard to troubleshoot sometimes. I'm going to show you a couple other ones where it can get very confusing. So if you're doing too much at once in Inkscape and then sending it through Blender, you might miss things, or you might just be very confused when it comes out the other side. So here's another example. This is another course I'm currently working on, which is Kapalua. And you can see right away, well, it's my course plane. So let me turn off my course plane. But now this one's pretty easy to see that there's definitely some issues. So if I just zoom in a little bit, I have a lot of Z fighting here. So these should be solid colors. And there's a lot going on here. So this is a good example of me being stupid, which was I tried to do too much at once. Way too much at once. This was actually one of my first attempts at V4 splining, and I learned my lessons, which was break up your cart paths. Okay, you'll see here, if I zoom in here and I highlight this cart path, there's something wrong with this cart path. You can see I've got Z fighting. Another thing I can see here Now keep in mind, I'm in my mesh, and I said I would show you an example here. If I come into my mesh and I come up here to this tool up here, I just clicked on this globe button right here, which is my viewport shading. I can now see all the triangles, okay? Remember I said when we take a mesh, we divide it up into small triangles? These are all those small triangles. And what you'll see here is I have my cart path, which is highlighted in orange right now, and I've got the cart path triangles, but there's also some other triangles here. So this did not cut correctly, even though it said possible errors and it continued through. This did not cut correctly. So let me come back up here and go back up to my viewport shading. And I have my cart path highlighted here. If I come over here to the right and let my mouse over here in my inspector and I hit numpad 0, it'll highlight my cart path right here and I can turn this off. Now when I turn that off, there should be nothing underneath my cart path if it cut correctly. Now up here, okay, look right here, when I turn this off, you can tell that cut through correctly there. But down here, it did not, okay? So something with this cart path didn't cut correctly. Now, I have my work ahead of me now because this is one big giant motherfucking cart path, okay? And I'm going to need to go in and probably my best bet here is divide this up and then run it through again to see if I can isolate where the problem is. This could be a double node, it could be a sharp corner, who knows at this point. But if I was smart, I would have done my cart paths on 1 or 2 holes only instead of this big gigantic one that I've got here. Now I also have some other issues here, which is this shape right here. Let me try to highlight it. I'm gonna hit numpad 0 and zoom in. And so over here, this is a custom 1 mesh. Let me turn this one off. So that one didn't cut correctly either, because you can see when I turn that one on and off, I'm still seeing my deep rough underneath it. So that's another one I'm gonna have to look at. Most likely, I'm gonna have to, this could be a double node, it could be something funny. I'll probably have another video on doing a little bit more deep dive. But you can see as I go through here, looks like there's another shape up here that's got an issue too. So which one is this? This is my deep mesh up here. Let me turn that on off. Well, that's an odd one because now you can see I'm turning this on and off. So there's something Z fighting here that I'm gonna have to inspect. But the bottom line here is, let me try to find, that might be a double actually, because I see that over here. I see this over here. Turn that on and off. And that didn't cut through correctly either. So there's something funny here. So what I'd like to do with this one, and this is path 3675, this one might be worth opening up the cut file to do some better inspection. So let's do that. So what I did is I went back into my share folder in Google and I found my cut blend. So that's what I opened up now. And you can see I still had that Z fighting associated with the course plane. So I'm going to turn that off to get rid of it. And in this case, you'll see when I highlight, these are just shapes because there's no triangles. They're not meshed yet, okay? You can see that you don't see those triangles that we saw before. So they're not meshes. These are just cut shapes. And now, so what was the shape? It was 3675. So if I come up here and I type in 3675, you can see it's my rough. And if I highlight it here and I bring my mouse over here, numpad 0, it's going to take me right to it. And you can see here, I'm definitely seeing some additional Z fighting. So that 3675, there. Here, let me get rid of my search here. So that's my cut outer deep. What's this one? 0. This is 2763. Let me turn that off. Yeah, so that did not cut correctly because I'm still seeing my deep underneath it. If something cut correctly, for example, this shape, and I turn it off, you're going to see it's empty space underneath it. So that cut correctly. This one right here did not cut correctly because when I turn it off, I still see my deep rough underneath it. So I'm going to go back into Inkscape and take a look at that shape. And you can see at this point, this is a big shape. This is going to be a tough one to troubleshoot to determine what the problem is. Now, I've got both of these, so I see here, this could be an issue. See this little sliver sticking out here? We want to avoid shapes like going parallel along another shape for a long period of time like that. So I probably want to fix that in Inkscape. But the bottom line is that's going to be an area you're going to concentrate in. I also see another area right here, this sliver. I'm going to move that back underneath the cart path so it cuts better as well. But I'm going to have to inspect those. But I just want to show you guys how to find these shapes on things that potentially went through and take a double look. It's really hard to determine what the issue is without seeing it in Inkscape. But let's take a look at another course here and then bring it up in Inkscape to see if we can find the issues. Okay, so yet another example. So we're looking at a mesh blend at this point. So remember that a mesh has those small little triangles. So you can see I've got meshes here. If I go back to the viewport shader, and there's obviously an issue with this deep rough, or I think that's deep rough, surrounding these holes here. So this hole here, this hole here, this hole here. So you can see this Z fighting that's going on, right? Something just obviously isn't right. And if I highlight this particular rough, and I hit numpad 0 over here, you can see that it is rough. And when I hide it, it did not cut correctly, because when I hide it, I'm still seeing that pink, which is the outer mesh. So it did not cut correctly. So that is path 1512. Now, I do know what the issue here, and look, and if I highlight this, all the areas right here, this rough, this rough, this rough here, this rough here, this is all one gigantic shape in Inkscape. Okay, so this is not my course. This is one by Mashy did. He's a pretty experienced designer, so he was able to go back and fix this. But if you're not an experienced designer and you made this, so this is one gigantic shape. Let me show you. Let me actually bring it up in Inkscape so you can see. This is one gigantic shape in Inkscape. So this makes it extremely difficult to troubleshoot. So you have to go and take a look at this whole thing. Now, I'm going to take you through this. It's going to take a couple minutes to show you some things to look for in this case, because this is a good example. One is always be on the lookout for these diamond-shaped nodes. So you see one right here, what we call a cusp node. So if I drag that one up and around, that is a sharp node. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that node, and I come here, highlight, and just change it to a rounded node. Okay, so now that looks a little bit better. And now if I'm going to trace the perimeter here, I'm going to remember, so I go back, I'm going to start tracing them, and this is going to take a little bit. Here's another one. So here's another what I think is a custom node. That's actually a double node. So I'm going to delete that. Let me see, is it a triple node? Nope, it's a double. And you can see now I got this kind of winged side to it. See, there's just this one handle out here. So I'm going to highlight this guy now, and we're going to round it. Now, also, you want to avoid things like these long areas where things go parallel. Now, this isn't too bad what he has here, but I would recommend an area like this, just pull that away from the cart path a little bit more so it's 100% clear. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag around this perimeter. Let me back out again. So this is good. Also, anywhere you cross another shape, I like to make it as perpendicular as possible. So this is good. He's coming in here fairly perpendicular. Now this cart path does concern me a little bit. Actually this is 2, so that's fine. He's cutting that cart path with another one. I thought this was one shape and that was a sharp corner, so it's not a problem. Let's see here. As I go down through, I like how he's staying well on the outside of this. This gets a little close, but I don't think it's too bad. This area, so these are 2 different shapes. That's probably okay. He crossed here fairly perpendicular. That's okay. That's okay. Come back up here, take a look at this area. This looks a little goofy right here. So it looks like we got a couple of cusp nodes That's a double, I think. Let me delete that one. Let me zoom in a little closer here. There's like a handle, weird handle. I'm just going to delete that one. And then I can double click and insert something new here. This one's also really sharp. I'm actually going to highlight these three and just round them out. Okay. And now I'm going to go down again, the outside here. This is what you need to do. And this is why I would recommend doing much smaller shapes so you don't run into this. Now, previous example I showed you, Kapalua, that's going to be a nightmare because that's miles and miles of cart paths. I really screwed myself on that one. It's going to be a fun. So still following us through. This is good. Nice perpendicular cross here. This all looks good. Ah, this looks kind of bad. And what is this? Let me highlight. So this is interesting. Well, let's go back here first. This is really interesting. This is almost, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on. Let's start over here. We're going to get there eventually. This video is going long, but this is really good stuff. I would take this first of all and delete it. And this is looking really kind of, I'm going to round that. Yeah, that's much better. I'm digging that much better. That looks good. So it's coming in here at a perpendicular angle. As DPR says, don't get too cute with stuff, okay? You don't have to match your course exactly. Take some artistic liberties in order to get things to cut correctly. This all looks really good. Ooh, this is not good. Let me delete that and let's see what this looks like. That's a really sharp corner. Let's just round that. Yep, that's much better. This is a cusp node. It could be a double. It's not, but we're just going to make it round. And there was that area I found earlier that I'm going to have to go back to where it had those really odd nodes that were on actually on the outside of the shape. Hopefully we'll cross it again here. Really exciting stuff, but this is what you got to do. The other alternative would have been to redraw this, which I think probably would have taken longer. Probably about the same amount of time. But then the thing is, you redraw it and you might have the same issues again because you drew it the first time it had issues. So if you draw it the second time, you might have issues, right? I'm going to zoom out again so I can move a little bit faster through here. I'm pretty good at spotting this stuff. What's this? It definitely needs rounded off. I can move this there. Okay, looks much better. Was this the area that had that goofy? No, it isn't. I got to find that. We kind of skipped over that area where we remember we saw those odd nodes. Go here. I might want to move this so it crosses a little bit more perpendicular to the cart path. Looks good otherwise there. Ah, what's this? That looks like just a sharp node. Let's change that to a round. This concerns me. So these two spots get a little too tight. Remember, you either want to be over it 100% or away from it. So I'm just going to move this away. And I'm also going to move this one away. This could be problematic. Probably isn't. It's probably okay, but just to be sure. Ah, here's that area I was talking about. So these nodes right here are really odd. I bet that's probably our problem. Let me highlight those and just delete them. And then we definitely have something funky here. Yeah, double node. Wait a minute. Is this a triple node? Nope, that is. Let me just change this to rounded. And I think we're getting somewhere here. I think we're in good shape. I think we should be back to the beginning pretty soon. Let me zoom out. So this could be a double here. Nope. We'll just switch that to round. Things look good here, and this is where we started. So you can see what I had to do there. I don't know if everything we fixed there, if all those things were causing problems or if it was one in particular, but hopefully just me running through this with you will give you an idea of things to look for, okay?